In this lecture, we're going to cover the basics of informative speeches with a lot of key information that's not only going to help you in terms of organizing and in preparing a good outline with strong references and a strong reference page with a logical order and a good organization, but also what you need to be thinking about when you're actually getting up to give the speech. So this is really your starting point for creating your informative speeches for this course. The first thing and the most important thing is you need to constantly be asking yourself, am I sticking to an informative speech? And what I mean by that is the goal of an informative speech is to teach or educate your audience something factual and objective, but you're not trying to persuade them or change their opinion. Your goal is to give them the information and let them make a decision based on that information. You do not want to ever in your informative speech tell them they should change something. Do not tell them they should donate more. Do not tell them they should quit doing a bad habit. Do not tell them they should start doing a new habit like exercise more. You do not at all, at any point in an informative speech, tell your audience members you should do this, or you should change this behavior, or you should change the way that you're thinking about this topic. You are telling your audience objective and factual information. Your goal is to educate or teach them about something new, and then they're the ones that make the decision. So as you're working on your speech, you should constantly be circling back to this and asking yourself, am I staying informative? Am I only educating and informing my audience? Am I only teaching them new information? Or am I trying to persuade them and convince them to do something different? If at any point in time you're asking your audience to change how they think about something or change their behavior about something, you're doing it wrong and you need to restructure that speech or that section of the speech to where it's only educational and informative. So how do you select your topic? There's 4 main steps that we're going to go over. Step 1, gain a little bit of information about your audience. Determine who your audience is. Consider commonalities and uniquenesses. You know, in this class, commonalities are we're all in the same class together, so you can use that. Try to be aware of particular demographics. Gauge your audience's interest and knowledge on a specific topic. This is psychological audience analysis, and consider their attitudes, beliefs, and values. Now, I get with this being an online course, it's kind of hard to do audience analysis, but consider some of the discussion forums that we've done throughout the course. You know a little bit about your classmates. Use that information to a certain extent and incorporate that into the speech in a way that you can personalize the speech to the rest of your classmates. The next step is determining your general purpose statement, which I'm doing this for you. You know what your general purpose is. The general purpose is the overarching, most abstract goal of the speech. There's usually 3, right? With any kind of speech, your goal is to either inform, persuade, or entertain. Your goal for this speech is to inform. Your general purpose, the overarching goal of this speech is to inform your audience about something. Again, not trying to persuade them and change their minds about something. You're not trying to entertain them like a stand-up comedian. You're trying to inform them and educate them on the topic you've chosen. After you know the general purpose, you need to come up with a specific purpose statement. Do not jump past this step. Do this so you stay on target. What you need to do is consider the parameters of the speech. Basically, look at the assignment sheet to know what the goal of the speech is. Review the textbook for brainstorming ideas. And when you come up to a topic that you want to work on and you want to speak on, draft a specific purpose statement. Follow the guidelines provided in the textbook and right here that I'm about to go over. A specific purpose statement is a 1-sentence statement that includes the objective you want to accomplish in your speech. It is audience-centered, it agrees with the general purpose, it addresses one main idea, and it is realistic. So if your general purpose statement is to inform, your specific purpose statement should include to inform. It's audience-centered, so it's to inform my audience. To inform my audience should be a part of everybody's specific purpose statement. I'm just letting you know that now. Your specific purpose statement should start off to inform my audience. Those 4 words should be the start of everybody's specific purpose statement. And if you don't do that, I know you're not watching this lecture. And then it addresses one main idea, and it's realistic. So look at this example. To inform my audience about the new local ordinance regarding seatbelts. It's audience-centered because it says to inform my audience. It agrees with the general purpose. The general purpose is to inform, and to inform is included. It addresses one main idea, that main idea being the local ordinance regarding seatbelts. It doesn't say to inform my audience about the new local ordinance regarding seatbelts, the dangers of smoking cigarettes, and how we can be a more sustainable, city. It doesn't have multiple ideas. This is not a preview of main points. This is not 3 or 4 ideas combined into one. It's one general statement that addresses one main idea, and it's audience-centered. So use this example to form your specific purpose statement. To inform my audience about the new local ordinance regarding seatbelts. Once you have your specific purpose statement, then you change it into a thesis statement. You take that specific purpose statement and you change it into a thesis statement by changing a few words. This is a 1-sentence summary of the central idea of your speech that you either explain or defend. For informative speeches, it's going to be a defense. And the difference between the thesis and specific purpose statement, the thesis is content-centered, where the purpose statement is audience-centered. So you wouldn't say anything like, your thesis statement wouldn't be to inform my audience about the new regulations regarding seatbelts. A thesis statement would be something like, there are new seatbelt regulations in the city of Battle Creek that you need to be aware about. So you see how that is different than the specific purpose statement, where the specific purpose statement says to inform my audience about the seatbelt regulations or the new ordinances regarding seatbelts, where it's more my goal is to inform my audience. The speech itself will have the thesis statement that you're going to actually say in the speech, and that would be something more like, there are new seatbelt ordinances in Battle Creek that you all need to be familiar with. It's a subtle difference, but it's a difference. So again, the specific purpose should really kind of be your guide for while you're researching and organizing your outline, and you should always come back to your specific purpose to make sure that what you're doing meets that goal of that statement. The thesis statement is what you're actually going to say while speaking. And when it all comes together, you should all do this. You should put together your topic, your general purpose, your specific purpose, and your thesis statement, and this should be included in your outline at the top. So you can kind of see how these all connect, right? The topic here is renewable energy. The general purpose is to inform. The specific purpose statement, by the end of the speech, the audience will be able to explain the basics of using biomass as fuel. So, okay, we're focusing on biomass as fuel for renewable energy. And then the thesis statement is biomass is a renewable resource that releases gas, yada, yada, yada. So review the connection between the topic, the general purpose, the specific purpose, and the thesis statement. This is the very first step you should take in crafting your outline and putting the rest of it together, because everything else that you do should fall under this umbrella. So now that you have a general idea of your topic and the direction you want to go, you need to now start doing some research. Read chapter 9.2 very carefully in terms of how research is conducted, and definitely make sure you understand the requirements for the speech. I need to see at least 3 references. I need to see them incorporated into your outline, and I need to orally hear them when you're giving your speech. So make sure you very, very much familiarize yourself with the research aspect of this assignment, because it's a very, very big portion of your grade. So some key things to consider when researching your topic: you need to use sources that are objective. Don't use things that are like blogs or opinion pieces or anything like that. This needs to be objective, factual stuff. It needs to be balanced, and what I mean by that is each main point should have the same amount of research. Main point 1 should not have like 3 to 5 sources, whereas main point 1 and 2 each only have 1. Balance the amount of research that you include throughout the speech, and again, these need to be credible research sources. Find new and engaging sources of information. Provide us with information that we don't know about. Do research that lay people don't know. The more nuanced, the more cool, the more interesting stuff you can find, the more interested your audience members are going to be in the speech. And finally, we've covered information overload before. So you don't want too much information in your speech, right? You don't want your speech to sound just like a list of facts and information that you're going through, but you also need to include enough so that it's credible. So it's a balance. Include enough research so that it's a credible speech and you're meeting the criteria of the assignment, but don't overwhelm your audience with just boatloads of information to the point where they can't keep up or understand the point of your speech to begin with. So those are some basics on the research that you need to conduct. As I said, definitely read chapter 9.2 and the requirements of the assignment so that you kind of know what you need to do for research. And once you've conducted your research, the next step is really organizing everything. And that starts by choosing the correct organizational pattern, the overall blueprint of the outline and the speech itself. So we've gone over the 10-step organization before, right? The 10-step organization covers any kind of speech you want to give, particularly ones that, are assigned to you in courses like this, which consist of three main points, or three main sections: your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. We know the introduction consists of four primary components, right? Your attention getter. This is the first thing that comes out of your mouth. When you get up and stand in front of your audience, I don't want to hear, "Hi, my name is Sheila, and I'm going to be covering, renewable energy." It's not what you want to do. You want to go up there and ask your audience a rhetorical question or offer a shocking statistic. Tell a story. Provide an evocative question that evokes emotions. Illustrate a hypothetical situation. Give us something cool, creative, and clever that we're going to be interested right off the bat, and it somehow relates to your topic. You want your audience, when you first get up there, to be thinking, "Ooh, what is this speech about? Where is she going with this? Why did he tell us that? I'm really interested in this story that they're providing," right? This is your chance to be super creative and fun to kind of pull your audience in. Then after that, you provide your thesis statement, where you're telling your audience specifically, "This is the topic we're talking about today." Next is your credibility statement. You tell us why you're credible. You let your audience know, "I've done research on this topic. I've had personal experience with this topic. I'm going to provide you objective research that I've looked up on this topic." Tell us why you're credible. Tell us that you have knowledge about this topic. Tell us that you're familiar with this topic. Give your audience reason to listen to you by telling them and demonstrating to them that you're a credible speaker on this topic. And then finally, you preview your main points for your audience. So whereas your thesis provides the overarching general overall purpose of the speech, the preview of main points breaks down specifically and in order the main points of the speech. Today I'm going to speak to you about renewable energy. Specifically, I'm going to speak about main point 1. Next, I'm going to talk about main point 2. Next, I'm going to talk about main point 3. You lay out those main points in the order in which they're going to appear in the body of the speech so that your audience is gauged and kind of calibrated to the direction you're heading with the speech. Then comes the body. The body of the speech, again, is those three main points that you listed off in the introduction, and they should follow the same order in which you previewed them in the introduction. And of course, you need transition statements between each main point. Now that I've talked about main point 1, I'm going to move on and talk about main point 2. Now that we've covered main point 2, let's move on and talk about main point 3. Don't say it like that. Incorporate the actual content into that phrase. If you're talking about, cats. Now that I've talked about yellow cats, let's move on and talk about calico cats. Now that I've talked about calico cats, let's move on and talk about, I don't know, hairless cats. I don't know cats that well, but you hear what I'm saying there? I don't want to hear you say, "Now that I've talked about main point 1, I'm going to move on to main point 2. Say what your actual main points are in your transition statements. And then finally, in the conclusion, you restate your thesis from the introduction. You review the main points that you just went over. Same thing. So the introduction has the preview. Here's what to come in this order. The body of the speech, you go over those three things in great depth. And then in the conclusion, you say it again. I went over these three things. I started here, I went here, and then I ended here, right? and then you have some kind of clincher. Tie it back to your attention getter. If you told a really cool story and your attention getter, circle back to that story and end on that story. If you provide a really interesting statistic in the beginning as your attention getter, circle back to that statistic as your clincher at the end and provide more of a badum to the speech. Right? This is your opportunity to come full circle from the introduction all the way back to the clincher so that you're completely wrapping up the whole speech. Some key notes here on transitions and signposts. You want to incorporate transitions and signposts throughout the entire speech. The transitions really are the statements that connect the large pieces of the speech, in between your main points, from the introduction section to main point one, in between each main point, and then from the final main point to the conclusion. This is where you want transitions. An example of this is, now that I've talked about my first main point, what the Habitat for Humanity is, let's move on to my second main point and review what they've done in Battle Creek. I need to hear these statements between the big parts of the speech, because this is how you keep your audience members up to speed with you. This is how you make your audience members follow along with you most effectively. Signposts do this as well, but these are smaller. These are smaller versions of transitions. You want to use these within sections of your speech to connect the content within that section. So an example of this, now that we've moved on to our second main point, let's use some signposts within that main point. Habitat for Humanity has done a lot of work in Battle Creek, including but not limited to fundraising, volunteer recruiting, and program development. That statement in itself is a signpost. You are outlining the three things that you're going to cover in this main point. And then you say statements like, first, when it comes to fundraising, then you talk about fundraising for a while. Second, in terms of volunteer recruitment efforts, this is where you talk about volunteer recruitment efforts for a while. Finally, Habitat for Humanity has developed key programs. This is where you talk about key program development. First, second, finally. These are all signposts. That very first statement before jumping into those three different sub points of that main point, first, second, finally, those are signposts. So the key is have really strong, solid transition statements between the main, huge sections of the speech and use signposts within the main sections of the speech so that it's make it as easy as you possibly can for your audience members to follow along with you. So the actual pattern, right? We talked about the 10-step organization, the 10-step method, but what content is actually put into those different 10 steps is dependent upon the organizational pattern you choose. These are one of the three that you need to be thinking about and selecting from. For most of you, it's going to be the topical pattern. And this is where you break down a large idea into small ideas or categories. In the example we were just working with the Habitat for Humanity, that was a topical pattern. An example, another, if you were to give a speech on an automobile and the various parts of an automobile, main point one might be the engine. Main point two might be the transmission. Main point three might be the exhaust system. You're taking the whole entity of the car and breaking it down into subcategories. This, I'm assuming, is what most of you are going to be doing with your topics. However, some of you might be speaking on topics that require a different kind of pattern. Maybe you are tracing the development of an idea of a product or an event. Maybe you are talking about, the history of Kellogg, the Kellogg Corporation. You might want to tell us, this is when it was formed at this day and time. This is when new leadership took over. This is when they invented this, whatever. If you want to inform your audience about key turning points in World War II. So if your topic is centered on telling your audience about how something was developed or how something came to be, you might want to consider a chronological pattern where your main points are following a chronological order. And then the last is a spatial pattern. This is where basically you arrange the main points based on their layout or proximity to each other. So if you wanted to inform your audience about the layout of a new mall that was being constructed, or some kind of, community-centered development that was taking place, or how to navigate through Kellogg Community College, you would use a spatial pattern, and your main points would kind of be, this is where this building is, and it has these features. And then the next building over, or the next room over, has these kind of features. Spatial patterns are kind of far and in between. Like I said, I imagine most folks are going to go with the topical pattern. Some of you might use chronological, but definitely review these in more depth in your textbook and make a conscientious effort about which kind of pattern you want to choose. So now that we've kind of talked about more macro level, how to organize your speech and the different types of patterns to choose from, and the general type of direction you want to go in organizing the content, let's talk more about how you actually inform within the speech itself and the content you need to include that'll provide you the methods to inform effectively. There's definition and there's description. When you inform through definition, you define concepts clearly and concisely. If you identify functions, you can use examples, but this is when you are defining something. If I wanted to define what a transmission in a vehicle is, I would define exactly what it is, what it does, what its functions are. I would provide an example of what how a transmission works. I'm defining things for the audience. Another way to inform is through description. This is, think back to our Martin Luther King Jr. speeches. This is when you use kind of evocative and vivid language to create verbal pictures for your audience. If you want to, if you're describing like sustainability or clean water or something like that, you would try your best to create verbal pictures for your audience to think about what it looks like to live in a world where you don't have clean water, and then compare that to a world in which clean water does exist. So again, definition, this is where you're defining things. Description is where you're being as descriptive as possible to help your audience kind of create verbal pictures in their mind that are vivid and clear and evoke emotions and different types of senses. There's demonstration and there's explanation. Demonstration is where you verbally instruct your audience how to do something, like how to tie a shoe, how to, tie a particular knot, how to, cast a fishing reel or a fishing rod, anything like that, when you're demonstrating to your audience how to do something. And then explanation is just where you're going really, really in depth on how something works, how something came to be, or why something happened. You're not just saying this is what it is, but you're diving more deeply into why it is, or how it is, or how it came to be. So again, these are both types of methods that you want to incorporate into your speech if it's relevant for you to actually inform while you're speaking. So final key pointers, the biggest takeaway: avoid persuasion. Constantly ask yourself throughout your speech, am I informing? If at any point in time you feel like you are asking your audience to either change the way they think about something, or if you're asking your audience to change their actual behaviors and the things that they do in their lives, restructure it. Remember, you're trying to educate your audience, you're giving them information, and you're letting them make the decision on what to do with that information. You are not at any point in time throughout your speech telling them, based on this information, you should do this differently, or based on this information, you should think about this topic differently. I know some of you are picking topics that you're extremely passionate about, and that's totally cool, but at no point in time should you ever be asking your audience to change how they think or what they do with your topic. Avoid information overload. Balance the information as we discussed. You need good, credible sources. You need good research in your speech, but you do not want to overwhelm your audience to the point where they can't keep up. Each of you are going to pick topics that you could talk about. You could do research that's endless on any topic for any speech, but you are limited to 3 to 4 minutes. You're limited to 3 main points. So hone in on 3 main points that are really, really good, really sound, and really important, and have information incorporated into each one of those main points that isn't overwhelming, but it's good and it's powerful stuff, and it engages your audience. And you engage your audience by providing good, credible, home run hitter kind of information. You do it in a way that's organized super effectively and logically. You don't overwhelm your audience. You provide them with new information about a topic. And again, you let them decide what to do with it. The best way to get good at this, you can listen to lectures and read all day long, but you want to look at example outlines. I provided one in Moodle. Your textbook has really good examples of outlines. Definitely review as many outlines as you can while you are crafting yours. And the best way to get good at speaking is to watch other speeches. YouTube example informative speeches on your own time. There are hundreds of thousands of good examples out there on YouTube. Watch a lot of them. Watch a variety of them. Pay attention to what you like. Pay attention to what you don't like. Compare what's happening in those speeches compared to what you're learning about in your textbook and in lecture, and try to adapt those good things. Try to incorporate the good things you see from other speakers into your own speech. So I hope this helps you a little bit in terms of knowing the basics of what an informative speech is about, what the overall goal of informative speaking is, and ideas about how you can start crafting and researching your own informative speech.